We're going to start today with our interactive presentation using ActionScript 3.0. This document is already set up and it already has a lot of objects in the library, and it's already an ActionScript 3.0 document. What that means is when you begin a new document, typically you've been pressing HTML5 canvas. This time, the creator of the document pressed ActionScript 3.0. That means we're going to give it interactivity by writing script and then having buttons that get clicked. And when the buttons get clicked, they go somewhere. That's all that means. So we've got this beginning document and it is set up correctly. And we're going to start by making our sort of home page screen. That home page screen is going to have a rectangle on it. So grab your rectangle tool. Don't worry about the colors right now because we're going to make those real specific later. You'll just create a new layer for your rectangle. And I'm going to double click right here and I'm going to make the navigation bar on this layer. So I'm going to call it NAVBAR, nav bar. Drawing the rectangle right like that. Perfect. Doesn't matter where it is, what size it is, what color it is, because I'm going to now take my black arrow selection tool, double click it and set it up. There's a lot of specific details here and all of these details are going to be managed in the properties panel. And I've written them down like this. So I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, so don't sweat remembering the details. I'm going to set my X and Y coordinates both to 0. And that sets me up in the upper left-hand corner perfectly. Next, I'm going to set the width and the height. The width is going to be the same size as the page, and the height is going to be 130 pixels. Next, I'm going to set the stroke and the fill color. So the stroke color is going to be invisible, that little red stripe. And the fill color is going to be a specific hexadecimal color. So I'm going to click right inside this box where I can type in letters and numbers. Hexadecimal colors are the way that web browsers recognize color. It takes the letters and numbers in combination and it reads that as a specific color. That way it doesn't matter what language you speak, that's always going to be red. FF0000 is always red in English, in French, in Spanish. Just like the color I'm about to put is always going to be blue. So it's going to be 3E, 3F, A9. And it's going to be this very perfect blue that goes precisely with the screen that I'm on. I'm going to put this up right here so you can hit pause and you can do that for yourself. The next thing I'm going to do is create a new layer. I actually already did that just a moment ago. It's called title. And on that layer, I'm going to create the title. So here is the type tool, the text tool, and this is going to be what my title looks like. So if you go into the properties panel, you're going to hit up Arial, bold, white, 40 point, and you're going to write the word Hawaii. So I'm going to put that back up in just a second. Let me go ahead and do that. Arial, bold, that needs to be 40 points. It needs to be white in color, and I'm going to write the word Hawaii. Just like that. It's going to be at the very tippy top right up here, and I'm going to actually set it up very specifically using X, Y coordinates. But for the time being, Arial, bold, white, 40 point, and write the word Hawaii. Positioning the word Hawaii, I'm going to set the X and Y coordinates to 15 and 0. So right back here, if I've got that black arrow selected, I'm going to set my X to 15, and I'm going to set my Y to 0, and that ought to set it just in the right spot. You'll notice that when I do that, I'm going to try to zoom in and show it to you. It looks kind of like there's a little gap here and there's a little gap here. Even though the Y was set to 0, there's a little bit of gap at the top of that letter, so it looks good. So that is my text for the top. I'm going to fit that back in window, locking this layer, moving on to the next layer. And in that layer, you're going to make the text that goes in the center of this. So that is, let's see, type tool. And you're going to write something about Hawaii. I'm going to pause while I write my thing about Hawaii, and I'm going to name the layer text. I'm going to spell it right. Text. So I'm going to write some text about Hawaii, something interesting about the state. You can go to Wikipedia, or you can wait and see what I write and use that. It doesn't matter. You can just write, I've always wanted to go surfing. Fine by me. I've written my text, and I'm going to go ahead and position it correctly. So I'm going to pull this up so you can see it. My X and Y and width are all going to be things that I set. My height will actually vary because I don't know how much you wrote versus how much I wrote. So 125, 200, 700, and who knows. Taking my black arrow, click away from it and then click with the black arrow and you'll see the X and Y. Excuse me. If you are clicked inside of there, you're seeing the properties of text. If you click with the black arrow, you see the X and Y. Now I get it. The X position is going to be 125. The Y position is going to be 200. The width is going to be 700. And the height will just self-adjust. If I change the height, it might cut something off, and I don't want to do that. The reason I want it this specific, though, is because I'm going to put images in the center of the screen, and I don't want to have to delete the text. I just want the image to cover the text later. Neither here nor there. I'm going to lock that layer and make a new layer. That new layer is going to be where I start putting things, my buttons, for example. So buttons are going to go on that layer. We're going to get to that in just a moment. I wanted to show you in my library what those buttons are going to be made out of. So I've got picture 1A, picture 1B, picture 2A, picture 2B. There's an A and B version of each of these images. And if you actually look at them, the A version of the image is pretty small. The B version of the image is much larger. Come on, B version, much larger. So what I'm going to have across the top is all the A versions for the buttons. And then in the center, when the buttons are pressed, the B versions are going to come up. If you look at this example, this is the A version. And it brings up the B version. So you're going to have to make your buttons. And actually, if you looked at the example, you saw the rollover effect whenever a mouse, a little bar on the top turned white. So we're going to get to that. The buttons are going to come in, and we're going to build them from scratch. So you're going to go to Insert and tell it you'd like a new symbol. And that new symbol is going to be called Button 1. And it's not surprisingly going to be a button symbol. So when you click OK, it brings you into this editing mode for a blank button. That is going to be where we take picture 1A and start to build it. I will warn you, the first picture, the first button is hard to make. Everything else, the other 5, are very easy. Because once we build the first one and do all the complicated stuff, the other 5 are going to be just copying and swapping out images. So, little hope to be had there. We're going to set the X and Y values of this to 0 and 0, and you see how that locks it around that registration point. I'm not going to change the width and the height because those are already preset correctly. The next thing I need to do is put in the up, over, down hit states of this button. So if you look on layer 1, I've got layer 1, I'm going to have 3 layers in this button. I'd like this picture to stay on throughout all of those states. So I'm just going to insert a frame in the hit state. The next thing I want to do is I want to make a new layer, and that layer is going to be for my bar that sits at the top. If you remember from the rollover effects, remember there's a bar that comes in, it's gray, and when it's pressed, it turns white. So we're going to go ahead and put that bar in, and that bar is a movie clip, and it's sitting right here in my library. So where is it? Line, that's what it's called. And that's going to come in at the overstate. I'm going to right click in the overstate, insert a keyframe, and bring that line in. Now that line is going to be at a different XY position. The X is going to be 0, and the Y is going to be -7. Everything is relative to that registration point right there, so -7 is going to be above it. Next, remember how the line changes colors when the button changes to white. So what we're going to do is in the down state, when the button is pressed, insert a keyframe, click that movie clip one time, and then we're going to come over to color effect. We've used color effect before. In that color effect, we're going to pull brightness out and see how that's all the way dark and that's all the way bright. You pull it to 100%. So in the overstate, it's gray. In the down state, it's white. The last thing I want to do to this button before I get done with it is add my audio element, that ukulele song. I'm going to make a new layer for that, and that's only going to come on when someone presses the button. So if I insert a keyframe in the down state, go to my library and take ukulele sound. There it is. Drag it to the stage and just drop it right on top of the button. You'll see it in the editing mode, in the layers in the timeline. If I go back to scene 1 though, don't panic. You're not going to see your button. Your button's right here in the library. You just haven't put the button on scene 1 yet. So we're going to grab that button and we're going to take it over to scene 1 and drop it. Okay. The next several buttons are much, much easier to make, and I'm just going to show you 1 or 2 of them, and I suspect after I show you 1 or 2 of them, you're going to have it figured out. So if you see in your library button 1, you're going to make a copy of button 1. To right-click on it right here, you're going to find duplicate, and not surprisingly, you're going to call it button 2. When you open up button 2, you're going to double click on this icon. Don't double click on the words. It just thinks you're trying to rename it. Double click on the icon. And this is the easy part. You're going to love this part. Click on the picture, hit the word swap, and put picture 2A. When you go back to scene 1 in your library, button 2 is different than button 1. And that's it. Right click, duplicate, button 3, double click it, go to the properties, hit swap, picture 3A. I'm going to line these up later, so don't worry about getting them precise. Just worry about getting them in the same general area. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my last 3 buttons. And I'll come back to you guys after I finish them and show you how to line them up, because that's the next part of this. I'll pause for a moment. All right, so we've got all 6 buttons on the stage, and you can see that I don't have them lined up perfectly. I could use strict X and Y measurements, but what I think I want to show you is how to use some of the other alignment tools. So make sure all your other layers are locked. Make sure buttons is the only layer that's unlocked, and then you can select everything on that layer. You can either hit Control A, or you can, I believe it's under Select All right there. I like Control A myself. I just thought I'd show you both of them. And we're going to modify Align. So go to Modify Align, and you're going to tell it to modify top. Ah, that took it too far up, but that got them all lined up. I'm just using my arrow keys on my keyboard and getting the buttons lined up between the word Hawaii and the bottom of my box. Looks pretty good that way. Kind of move them around until you get it just right. The next thing I want to do is I've got some gaps between here, but some overlaps here. I'm going to distribute widths. Modify, Align, Distribute widths. See what that does is it pushes them all so they're equidistant. It's kind of good. So I wanted to show you that. And after that, we're going to give these buttons some instance names. The instance names are for when we're scripting them. Before I get to that, it just occurred to me that I have misspelled a word in my text. That's fine. And actually, that's kind of a good moment for us because that reminds us that we have to go back into other layers to change things. So my text is in this layer. I need to unlock it and change that. That's a little typo for you. What I'd like to do is I'd like to leave this here because I'm going to make a second video and I'm at about 13, almost 14 minutes. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to come back in a second video. This one's going to get uploaded and that'll be part 1. Okay, so we'll come back in part 2.